for joining us for this episode on the Deja Vu series, where I have Morgan Reno with me today, who started a YouTube channel called Such a Pretty Face. She does have a pretty face, and she's also going to tell you her story of losing more than 250 pounds. Jamie, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
So you call yourself a recovering food addict. How did you come to that determination?
I came to that determination through a few things. The first, was really understanding that, after many years of obesity, morbid obesity, I had finally lost the weight, and was keeping a maintained sort of new size, right? A new shape. And some would call it, optimal, in the sense of where I was in markers with doctors, and I sort of arrived, right? But I was still trying to moderate processed foods. And that really put a food monkey on my back for many years. All kinds of spikes and crashes in my blood sugar, all kinds of spikes and crashes in my mood and the way that I interacted with everyone. And it just, my focus, my mental clarity, all of those things were affected. And what I realized was that I was obsessed still with food, even though I was maintaining this smaller size and eating less. And I understood the benefits of healthy eating, but I could not shake the processed food. And so once I started to, do some research and sort of, find my way into some talks around processed food addiction and food addiction in general, part of that was in the 12-step recovery rooms. And I really understood that, oh my gosh, I am like an alcoholic around processed food. And it was a huge light bulb. And I realized that just like an alcoholic, struggles with alcohol and can't take one drink without wanting more, I can't take one bite of those foods without wanting more. And it was really enlightening and eventually very freeing.
Yeah. I owned a wellness spa for a number of years. So I had many people that came through my doors. And so it isn't just my own experience that I draw upon. Although I was one of those repeat dieters, and many, many people listening are a repeat dieter, and they haven't made that connection yet, that it's not how much they eat, or it's not trying a new diet. It truly is removing the addictive foods
Right.
from their diet.
Exactly. Yes. And I had the same experience in the sense of repeat dieting and, constantly trying different things. All of my life, really, since I was a young girl, I was put into some of the massive, nationwide weight loss programs. I was put into them by my mom and encouraged to keep going in them. And I just felt like, I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and I felt like someone who was in her 40s and 50s who was trying to, be this adult who this kid in this kid's body who was being barraged by processed foods and didn't understand it and didn't know it. So it forced me to grow up really fast in many ways.
Oh my gosh, I feel for you. I know the struggle that many of us have with food, with our weight, and I'm seeing that more and more with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not making the connection. So many people are not making the connection that it's the processed foods, because we're surrounded now by all these convenience foods.
Yep. And what I realized is, when I came into recovery and started to abstain from the processed foods, I needed to understand how the food cues triggered me, and being out in the environment of food everywhere. And this is a socially acceptable addiction that, so many millions and millions of folks in our country certainly have. It became very hard to, to really at first to be around all of those cues and understand that I was being barraged. And slowly but surely, as I got more tired throughout the day, as I got, more exposed to the cues, I really needed to remove myself from those environments at first, especially early in recovery, because my body would still respond to those chemical cues and those visual cues of seeing others eat it.
Yeah.
So it was just, this recovery for me was all encompassing. It wasn't just one, it wasn't just psychological or emotional or physical. It was everything.
Yeah, it's like therapy, right? It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. I've
Yeah.
done therapy as well. And when I removed the processed foods, when I removed sugar, it was like a form of therapy because it brought up all kinds of issues for me, woundings I couldn't quite name that the sugar had been used to numb.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's something underneath that, or maybe something underneath our food cravings that
Totally.
we haven't gotten in touch with.
And in my experience, yeah, I couldn't agree more, Lisa. In my experience, that is exactly what I found as well. When I began to recover and pull the food out, I immediately started looking at my relationships in my life and realizing how my relationships were affected by me in the food and by me out of the food. So that was a critical part of it. But then I also, as I journeyed through therapy as well, therapy was a big part of my recovery. It still is. Um, but now instead of the exploration side of therapy, now I'm working in the action side of therapy, where I have tools and resources and guides that help me take action when things come up versus just learning about it. And what I'll say is I learned a lot about how my trauma was a huge catalyst for my addiction, right? My addiction could have taken any form. I could have easily been an alcoholic. I just like the taste of brownies better. It really was all it came down to, and I could do it earlier. It was it was encouraged. It was socially reinforced. And growing up in an Italian American family, food was everywhere. Food was love. Food was comfort. Food was celebration. Food was culture, and it was pride and connection. And so it was encouraged to eat, and it was encouraged to have these foods around. And when I had so much pain, these rich foods, I thought, sort of gave me ease and comfort, but they really were making me so sick, so sick.
Yes. Gosh, it sounds like we grew up in the same family. All the bread and pasta and carbohydrates. And yes, I couldn't agree more. Food was accessible younger. I started thinking about drinking and smoking when I was like 7, but clearly I couldn't. So sugar and food was my go-to until I was old enough to smoke, which I started that at age 11.
Okay.
And I probably would have become an alcoholic, except that it really messes with my blood sugar and would make me pass out. And I've never really been a big fan of the taste. You're right. Brownies tasted better.
Yes. Yes. And it's so interesting because as I grew up and I've been unpacking all of the things from childhood and the tumultuous, dramatic, traumatic things that happen. Um, I'm really learning that as I make peace with all these different parts and people and things and memories, as I make peace with them and accept and fully love myself, which is a process and it's a practice, um, I I don't even think about food. Like I just find myself not even thinking. So of course, it helps that all of those addictive foods are out of my diet and out of my home. Helps, of course. I don't have the chemical cravings. But now I know that I notice that as I unravel and unwrap everything, my emotional cravings are just subsiding. And I just naturally get hungry when I'm hungry and I eat till I'm full and I move on. And that's that. And it's just, it's becoming more and more effortless, which is a place that I really never thought I would be.
Yeah, it sounds peaceful.
Peaceful. Exactly.
I would say a lot of people lack peace around food and they don't
Yes.
know why.
You're right. That was me. I never thought I'd have peace. I never thought I thought I would always be white knuckling. I thought I would always be holding on with with a death grip to my food sobriety. I thought I would always be trying to resist the foods and resist the temptations and be called to by it. And I'm realizing now that, I just don't, I look at it the same way I look at cocaine or heroin or if I were to, see somebody doing those drugs, I would just think that's those are poisons. They're really something I would never even associate with or want to try. And now these foods are becoming like, I see them and I think that is absolutely, one of the things in my recovery community, that's the path to pain. When I see those foods, that's the path to pain. That's the path to depression and anxiety and overwhelm and job loss and relationship issues and family stress. It's nothing that I want to associate with.
I have to believe that most people are still unaware of how addictive processed foods are. And my biggest concern has even shifted to the kids, because we have been fed this lie that we need to eat more frequently to improve our metabolism.
Mhm.
Eat 6 small meals a day to boost your metabolism. Well, how is that working out for our country?
Exactly.
Going low fat, that didn't reduce heart disease.
Yeah.
And so all of these lies that we were told, that fat is bad, eat more frequently, the bottom of the pyramid, has grains, grains, and grains, which all convert to sugar. And so now we're handing our kids packages of food every two, or edible products, I like to call them, um,
Exactly.
every 2 hours, because that's what we were. And they're saying they're hungry. Well, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Well, yeah, because the processed food that you ate spiked your blood sugar, you crashed, you're hungry again. I
Exactly.
think we've lost our normal cues.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And the way the processed food is packaged and marketed and surrounds us, I think that perpetuates it. So it really puts us all in this situation where we are slaves. I feel I was a slave to my cravings, a slave to my blood sugar, a slave to my hypoglycemia, which is something that runs in my family, and a slave to the processed food marketing machine. So I had no attachment, true attachment to my hunger and satiety in a true physical way. What I was experiencing was head hunger. Janine Roth, right? She talks about head hunger and heart hunger, and all I knew, sure, all those things, but all I knew is it wasn't real, true physical hunger, and I really didn't even know what physical hunger felt like. I had just never let myself get there.
I agree. I didn't know what physical hunger felt like, but I didn't know what satiety felt like either. I never felt full. So I would just overeat. My husband would always say, "Why do you overeat?" I would overeat to the point that I'm bloated and my stomach's distended and I felt miserable. But it's because I never felt full with the foods that I was eating. It wasn't until I switched to whole foods and real foods
Exactly.
that I went, "Oh, wow, this is what satiety feels like." And my concern is that many have lost their ability to discern what their body truly needs.
Hmm.
And because of all of the marketing messages, we are overfed and undernourished. And this is one reason why we're setting New Year's resolutions to lose weight, but we don't really realize what's causing that.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So you're really, and I felt like it too. I felt like I was sort of playing that whack-a-mole game where it was like carbs and fat and calories and fasting. And, it was just, even wearing a continuous glucose monitor, or considering it. All of those things were just sort of, whacking away, and something else would pop up. And until I removed those foods, I could not get in touch with my body's intuition. I could not get in touch with my true cravings for, hunger, I should say, not cravings, and true satiety. The other thing that I really, was so fascinated by was how effortless it was. I would hear people talk about, back when I was in the processed food, I would hear people talk about intuitive eating, and they would be like, just take a bite and savor. And I would just be like, are they insane? Like, I don't even taste the food. It just literally has to be swallowed. And it's more about the seeking and the eating than it is actual enjoyment of anything. And so for me, I would hear them talk about intuitive eating and think that was just crazy. Like, how they're obviously these intense, ascended spiritual beings, because that's not anything that I could do. And now, right, when you pull the processed foods out, now I'm like, I kind of get it. I get it. Like, it's not something I practice intentionally, but it just sort of happens, and I just go with it. And I think, yeah, this is because I'm feeding myself the foods that my body was made to process.
Yes. There was a book that I read that helped me to quit smoking, called The Easy Way to Quit Smoking,
Mhm.
where he builds the argument that you're not craving the nicotine. The nicotine in your body is craving the nicotine.
Yeah.
It's the chemical reaction and the chemical craving. And once you get the nicotine out of your body, you will stop craving the nicotine. Well, I found the same to be true with the sugar and the carbs. It was a very miserable process for me to wean myself off of sugar and carbs. And I realized back then that this feels like cigarette addiction.
Mm.
So I'm like, I think this is like an addiction. I must just have an addictive personality. But I kept reminding myself what I had read in that book, that if it's the sugar and the carbs that crave the sugar and the carbs, once I get rid of them, I won't crave them. And there's some truth to that, not to mention physiologically, the sugar and carbs can feed yeast and other things that make you crave carbs. But for people out there wondering, how could I ever get rid of those?
Mm.
I think we're here to say it's possible.
Yes, yes, and and also to find, for me, I like to use the term processed foods because certainly sugar is not in my diet, but processed foods in general, carbohydrate sources or otherwise, are not in my diet. So when for me, um, I do well listening to my body, and it tells me what it needs, and it even sends me pictures, right, images in my brain I'll get of something that I think, oh, that's so interesting. Like, I'll share an example. Certain times in my monthly cycle, I will get flashed pictures in my brain for no reason, like around mealtime, right, but no reason otherwise, of whole food proteins. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I think that's what I'll be having with my next meal. And I just eat it and move on. And then I'll realize, as part of my, my hormone shifts for that month, I'm like, that was why my body was craving that. It's just fascinating. Like, it'll tell me very clearly with certain vegetables that it wants. It'll tell me, certainly, of course, about hunger and satiety now, but it'll also just kind of show me what it wants. And believe me, the light bulbs are never processed foods. The cravings that I have are never like, ooh, that'd be so fill in the blank. It's a very, very different, when I get pictures now, it's whole foods. It's one meal of, you know, um, different components of the whole foods that I'm used to eating, and I move on.
Oh my gosh, I love that. It's what I wish for all of the kids I work with in particular, that they can learn to tune into their body. And unfortunately, I'm afraid that they tune into what the marketing messages tell them, or the cues that they're getting. And kids are so heavily marketed to,
Mhm.
through the games, the ads that run on the games, the videos, and everything else that they're participating in. But
Yeah.
it's really what we hope for everyone in this Deja Vu series, is that they can tune into their body and remove the interference.
Mhm.
Processed food is a big interference to our natural needs, to our body.
That's right. And I don't think people understand it can be as, for me, it was easily as disruptive, if not more so, than alcohol whenever I ingested it, which wasn't often because I was getting my fix and sugar from the processed food. Um, and for sure, if I had other addictions, to chemicals, and thank goodness I don't, but I can imagine I didn't think it was as disruptive to my life as a drug addiction could have been. But I look back now, and there was a period when I was deep in my addiction, probably, you know, and I was the joke of it was I was, walking around in a smaller body, and I was still trying to moderate the processed foods. So, 4 or 5 years, I was in a deep hole of moderating the foods that were making me very emotionally dysregulated and very overwhelmed with life and all the natural occurrences in it. I just was like a child walking around in an adult's body, trying to moderate these drug-like substances and failing miserably. I lost jobs, I lost relationships, I damaged family, ties. I have, major losses, and not to mention infertility, never having children, major losses from this addiction, major losses that I'm still working out the effects of those losses, the effects of what this addiction took from me in my life. And it is something that is why that I'm out there talking about this, because I see it happening around me a lot. And I see that especially women having so many problems with fertility and infertility, struggling with that. And if they were educated on the effects of processed foods on body and reproduction, if they were educated on processed foods on their emotional states, you would have, I think, women who were more connected to themselves, where their bodily functions would be more optimal. They would have much more emotional regulation, connection to others, connection to themselves. And that's I think it's what gets me going in this movement every day.
Well, I'm grateful for that. I was going to say it's such a blessing for you to put your story out there and your honesty. It's difficult. I had a picture of myself that I had up when I owned my wellness spa of me at 36 years old, when I was over 200 pounds. My skin was, pasty. I had no color in me, dark bags under my eyes. I was successful. I'm an educated person. I was in a successful IT career. Like, it looked like I had everything going for me, but underneath, I was falling apart and I had a lot of health issues at 36. But I was eating out 7 days a week because of my career, and I was a carbohydrate addict and way too many processed foods. I won't even name the things that I would like to come home and have for dinner every night because they were highly addictive.
I
And I
get it.
remember my spa employees telling me, that's embarrassing. You shouldn't even put that picture up. And I'm like, no, I want people to know. First of all, they can see the transformation now that I removed those foods and I've detoxed, I've removed the interference.
Yes.
So this is to give people hope. And for a lot of people that would come to see me, they're like, you don't understand. I'm like, no, actually, I do understand. But there is some embarrassment or shame to put your story out there when obviously there's professionals looking at me going, I worked with you, you're a professional, and you're now saying you were an addict.
Yeah. It's interesting because in my full-time job, and it's a company I love, and an organization and the industry that I love, I'm in healthcare, but I have had mentors in the industry, right? Mentors tell me, hey, if you want to grow in this industry, which is, if you want to grow in your career in this industry, you really shouldn't talk about the fact that you used to be over 400 pounds. It is, nobody knows you that way. And it's been, since 2008, since I began losing the weight, and 2012 since I've kept it off, and sort of continued to find my ideal health. And they're like, we all know that you take good care of yourself, and we all see that you're very, very focused and driven and disciplined around your food. You don't need to tell anybody why. You don't need to tell anybody that you used to weigh this much, and how you looked, and show pictures. Nobody wants to see that. And I just remember thinking, then nobody wants to see or know me and know the chutzpah and the resilience that it took to do what we do when we recover, right? All of us that are recovering from this addiction, it takes immense drive and dedication and planning and resilience and fortitude. I just, like, aren't those qualities and traits that people would want in a career, in a career advancement? And once I put it that way, they changed their story. But I've had many mentors in my career tell me, don't talk about
Well, I'm grateful that you're talking about it because we have
it.
people listening, right? And we're providing them hope and support. And we both got started about the same time. So my journey started 2007. you were 2008. 2008 is when I bought a wellness spa and started helping other people. And I couldn't find a Jamie. I couldn't find a Lisa. It was a lot of books, a lot of research, a lot of trial and error. And now, we're coming forward with our stories so we can help another person who
Yeah.
can't figure out why. They've tried every diet and they're just miserable. They can't lose weight. They have depression. I always freely admit that from age 26 to 36, I was on Ativan, Zoloft, and Wellbutrin. Processed food can cause depression. We have a depression and an anxiety epidemic. And that makes it difficult. Once you're in that state, it makes it difficult to plan your meals or to change your diet.
Absolutely.
And that's why people would come to me and they would say, what does healthy look like? And that's why my classes ended up in the kitchen, because I had to give them something tangible to start with. And once they cleared that brain fog, then they could start making those decisions and choices on their own. But that's what we're here for, is to provide the support.
Yes. Yes. And also, to let people know that we were there, we understand. And they, I had so much shame. I had so much shame around my depression and anxiety and, the emotional dysregulation that I had. I'm understanding more and more about, once the food is gone, right? I'm still seeing some triggers that I have around certain areas and people in my life, but they are very specific and they're triggered in very specific ways. It's not just like it's all the time. So I'm learning how to untangle that. But there was so much shame before I began this process back, in well, it was, I guess 15 years ago now, almost, it'll be 15 years in January. And I had so much shame around why I was who I was, how I showed up in the world. Not even to mention the physical appearance, but really the emotional issues that I had. I didn't understand that it was related to the food and the trauma. I didn't understand that it was related to childhood. And I didn't understand that, growing up morbidly obese, and I was morbidly obese from really, I think from an infant. I see pictures and I think that is an obese infant. But I look now and I think, I was eating for comfort. I was eating for distraction and numbing. I was eating to try to feel connection to other people or to peace, right? Because all of these things were happening in my body emotionally that I didn't understand and didn't want to feel. So I just used food to not feel it. And so now when I think about how free I feel and able to stay connected to my body, I am, the relationship with my body, instead of disassociating and cutting myself off from my body by using food to disassociate from it. Now I am learning how to welcome it, and the shame that I had is going away. It's really just, a total regeneration.
Oh my gosh, I love how you said now you feel free, because that's how Freedom Kitchen came about.
Mhm.
And, even when the name came to me, it was because clients would say, you've set me free with, the programs that I teach. And I thought, that's really my life's purpose, to
Mhm.
set myself free and to help model that for other people and help set them free.
Yes.
And through deep contemplation, I've determined that our freedom in all areas of life begin and end in our kitchen.
Yes.
Are we giving our power away? Are we able to critically think? Are we able to intuitively eat? Do we know what's best for us?
Mhm.
That all starts, those choices all start in the kitchen, and then they have a ripple effect into the rest, of the areas of our life, what we use for personal care products or household cleaners, or what companies we support and what companies we don't
Right.
support.
Right. Or how we show up in the business world or in the working world, whatever that is for you. Yeah, I agree.
Yes. Yes. Well, you just summed up the whole genesis of Freedom Kitchen.
I
And
love it.
I'm so grateful you're sharing your story, Jamie. This has really been a pleasure. my goal and intent is just to provide a support system. So, for everybody listening, check out Jamie's YouTube channel, and keep up with her and her story. She is far more consistent than I, and on sharing her journey and where she's at, and how, how you can show up in the world. She's modeling it. That's really important. You're actually modeling it. So when we walk our talk, then others can follow.
Thank you. And I appreciate platforms like this, certainly the work that you do, helping people get free from the food, showing them what it takes day in, day out, and really how joyful it can be. I appreciate you very much for this opportunity to talk about my journey here with your network. And I'm also, I've got a lot more work to do as I'm heading towards my book writing. I've got a lot more work to do on my YouTube channel. But I love getting out there and really telling people, hey, this is what food addiction and recovery looks like. This is what it looks like day in, day out. This is what it looks like, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. This is what it looks like to keep making those same choices. And the biggest, Lisa, I'll say for your community, the biggest lesson that I could give is there is no finish line. There is no maintenance mode. There just isn't. The same behaviors that I had day one back in 2008, the same behaviors that I had to get started are the ones that I still have today. And they are, they're hypervigilance around the food and the food cues. They are movement every day. They are spiritual practice every day. They are connection with the community every day. And they are, working through that talk or emotional work as well, with someone who's trusted. So those components are still in there is no maintenance mode. There is no, I'm going to go ahead and have this food back in my life now. Because that simply that's not recovery. For me, recovery is not having the foods in my life, the processed foods in my life. And, it allows me to experience all the other benefits of recovery.
Yes. Oh, you summed that up so well. Thank you so much, Jamie. You guys will be hearing more from Jamie. She's working on her book. She wrote a blog post that we're going to be featuring on the Freedom Kitchen blog. So we will be in constant communication, I'm sure. So you will all continue to hear from her. Thank you again, Jamie, for your time today.
Thank you.
Until next time, farewell.